A Navy SEAL returned home to escape war, but found another battle waiting, a dying German shepherd guarding a newborn baby in the middle of a snowstorm. He carried them both to safety, but what seemed like a rescue was only the beginning. Behind that child lay a secret someone would kill to keep buried. As he uncovers the truth, enemies close in, and faith becomes his only weapon, until a final miracle turns the coldest night into light. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God hides in the darkest places. Bozeman lay buried beneath a storm of white silence, where wind sang through the pines and every sound felt swallowed by the cold. Inside a small wooden cabin at the edge of town, Ethan Cole, a young Navy SEAL recently returned from deployment, sat before the dim glow of a fireplace. The faint scent of ash and pine filled the air, and for the first time in months, he allowed himself to breathe without scanning for danger. His hands, calloused and steady from years of service, rested around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He had seen enough of war to know peace never came easy. Even now, in the quiet, he could still hear the echoes, the radio static, the shouts of his men, the gunfire fading into dust. He came back to Montana to heal, but healing, he was learning, was just another kind of battle. Outside, the storm thickened. The roof groaned beneath the weight of snow, and a low whistle from the wind pressed against the windows like a restless spirit. Ethan was used to silence, but not this kind. This was the silence of a world holding its breath. He leaned back in his chair, half dozing, when a sharp, distant sound cut through the night. It wasn't the wind. It was high-pitched, fragile, the cry of something alive. A second sound followed, a bark, desperate, hoarse, echoing through the storm. Ethan froze, instinct flaring awake. Training had taught him that hesitation killed. Without thinking, he grabbed his flashlight and rifle, not out of paranoia, but habit. The moment he stepped outside, the wind bit through his coat. Snow swirled violently, stinging his face as he scanned the forest line. The sound came again, a faint whimper now fading toward the trail behind the cabin. God, he muttered under his breath and started moving. The forest was a labyrinth of white and shadow. Each step sank deep into the snow, the beam of his flashlight bouncing off drifting flakes. The bark came again, weaker, strained. He followed it until he saw a dark shape half buried beneath a pine tree. As he approached, the shape shifted, a low growl rumbling from beneath the snow. Ethan crouched slowly, the soldier in him measuring distance and danger. But what he saw next cut through every wall he'd built around his heart. A German shepherd, trembling, bleeding from a deep gash near its side, curled protectively around a newborn baby wrapped in a thin gray blanket. The dog's body covered the infant completely, shielding it from the snow. When Ethan reached forward, the shepherd growled weakly, refusing to move. The sound was more plea than threat. Its eyes met his, not fearful, but defiant, the look of something that had fought to its last breath and would do so again if it had to. "It's okay," Ethan said softly, lowering his rifle. "I'm not here to hurt you." He removed his gloves, hands bare against the freezing air, and reached for the blanket. The baby stirred, a tiny cry escaping as the dog finally let out a shuddering breath. Its tail twitched once before it slumped, exhaustion overtaking will. Ethan scooped the infant into his arms and pressed his ear to its chest. Faint heartbeat, shallow breathing, but alive. The gray blanket was soaked through. He wrapped his own jacket around it and looked down at the dog. "Hang on, buddy," he murmured. "You did your part. Now it's my turn." He lifted the shepherd carefully, feeling the warmth of blood seeping through his sleeve. The animal whimpered but didn't fight, its head resting against his shoulder as if it had finally found permission to let go. The trek back to the cabin felt endless, the weight of both lives heavy in his arms. Snow blinded his path, and twice he slipped, catching himself just before falling. At one point, he thought of setting the dog down to move faster, but one glance at its half-closed eyes stopped him. No man left behind. That was the rule. Even now it still applied. When he reached the cabin, Ethan kicked the door open, heat rushing out in a wave of relief. He laid the baby near the fire, covering it with a wool blanket. The dog he placed beside the hearth, close enough to feel warmth, but not too near the flames. The creature's sides rose and fell unevenly, breath shallow. Ethan poured water into a bowl, then used his medical kit to clean the wound. The scarlet stain spread over the gauze like ink in snow. "Stay with me," he said, his voice firm, like giving an order in battle. The baby's crying softened into small hiccups, its tiny hand gripping the edge of the blanket. Ethan paused, his eyes tracing the faint outline of a pendant around the baby's neck, a silver charm shaped like a feather. Whoever had left this child here hadn't meant to abandon it easily. Something had gone wrong, badly wrong. He sat back on his heels, the firelight flickering across his face. Images flashed through his mind, the burned villages overseas, the children he couldn't save, the soldiers who didn't make it home. He had told himself he was done fighting, but maybe some wars didn't end. They just changed shape. The shepherd stirred, a faint growl rumbling in its chest, and opened its eyes. Ethan met the gaze again, fierce, loyal, and weary. "You did good," he whispered. "You kept them alive." The dog's eyes softened for a moment before closing again, as if trusting him to take over. Outside, the storm still howled, wind clawing at the cabin walls, but inside, something shifted. The fragile stillness of three souls pulled together by chance and suffering. Ethan sat by the fire, the child in his arms, the wounded dog at his feet, and felt a strange certainty settle in his chest. He didn't know who they were or where they came from, but he knew one thing for sure. They were meant to cross his path tonight. He leaned back, exhaustion creeping through his bones, and let the fire's warmth blur the edges of his thoughts. The baby sighed, softly in its sleep, the dog's breathing steadied, and for a fleeting moment the storm outside sounded less like rage and more like a hymn, the kind that carried both sorrow and salvation. Somewhere deep in the woods, unseen through the snow, a faint flash of headlights vanished into the dark. The night had not finished its story yet. The storm still howled above Bozeman, wrapping the valley in a suffocating whiteness that swallowed every road, every sound, and every thought. Inside the small cabin, Ethan Cole worked with mechanical precision. He had survived missions in deserts and war zones, but he had never fought a battle like this. A fight against time, against cold, against the slow, fragile rhythm of two small breaths that depended on him now. The fire hissed and spat sparks as he adjusted the blankets around the infant. The baby's skin was cold to the touch, its breathing shallow. The German shepherd beside him, though weak, lifted its head every time Ethan moved, eyes tracing his every gesture with unspoken trust. Ethan found himself speaking aloud, maybe to the dog, maybe to himself. "You kept her alive," he whispered, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Now it's my turn." He knew the cabin couldn't keep them warm for long. The temperature was dropping fast, and the child's body wasn't strong enough to fight it. He reached for his truck keys hanging by the door. The engine was old but dependable, a habit from years of travel into unstable places. He wrapped the child in a thick coat, swaddling her tightly, then lifted the dog again, feeling its trembling weight against his arm. Every movement sent a jolt of pain through the animal's body, but it didn't whimper. Instead, it stared ahead, ears twitching faintly, as if aware that their fates were bound together now. The drive through the storm was a blur of white chaos. Headlights barely reached beyond the hood, snow whipping violently in the wind. Ethan gripped the steering wheel with both hands, every muscle tense. His training kept him calm, steady breaths, eyes scanning for signs of the road. But somewhere beneath the discipline, emotion pulsed. The same feeling he'd buried after Afghanistan, after the day his team never made it back from an ambush that went wrong. He remembered cradling a dying comrade in his arms, promising he'd make it home. He had, but home had never felt real again until now, when he looked over at the sleeping child on the seat beside him. The radio crackled faintly, static, and then the faint voice of a dispatcher. Roads closed north of the valley, visibility near zero. He turned west toward Main Street, where he knew a light would still be burning. The Bozeman 24-hour veterinary clinic, run by Dr. Lillian Moore, stood like a lone outpost against the storm. He'd met her once before, years ago, when his old K-9 unit dog had been shot during a raid. Lillian had worked through the night to save that animal, and though she never asked about the mission, she had known by the look in his eyes that it wasn't one meant for the news. When he reached the clinic, he left the truck running and kicked the door open with his shoulder. Warmth and fluorescent light spilled into the snow. "Help!" he shouted, his voice rough. Within seconds, footsteps approached. Dr. Lillian Moore, mid-40s, steady and composed, appeared from the back room. She had that air of quiet authority that came from seeing too much of life and death in small, breathing forms. "Ethan Cole," she said with surprise, eyes darting to the bundle in his arms. "What have you got there?" He set the baby gently on the counter, found her outside, in the storm. The dog wouldn't leave her. He motioned toward the German shepherd, now lying limply near the doorway, its breathing ragged. Lillian moved quickly. "Get her closer to the heat lamp. She's hypothermic." Her hands worked fast. Thermometer, oxygen mask, warm saline drip. Ethan stood aside, watching the efficiency of someone who had seen countless emergencies and still cared every time. Then she turned to the dog. "Deep laceration, left side. Knife wound by the look of it." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You sure?" She gave a short nod. Too clean to be an accident, and she hesitated, leaning closer. "There's ash embedded in the fur. He's been near fire." A cold knot formed in Ethan's stomach. He looked at the dog, the faint streaks of soot on its chest, the faint smell of smoke he'd mistaken earlier for the storm's damp chill. His eyes drifted to the baby. The blanket was gray but stained dark near one edge. He realized it wasn't just dirt. It was smoke and blood. "Someone tried to burn them?" he said quietly. Lillian didn't answer. She didn't need to. The room filled with the hum of machines, the hiss of oxygen, the steady rhythm of Lillian's movements. She worked on the dog next, cleaning and stitching the wound while Ethan held the IV line steady. The shepherd's breathing slowed, steadying slightly. Lillian glanced at him. "She's lucky you found them." He didn't respond. Luck wasn't a word he trusted anymore. After war, luck felt like a cruel joke, a coin flip where too many lost. The baby stirred again, a soft sound escaping her lips. Lillian smiled faintly. "She'll make it. Strong heartbeat now." Ethan exhaled, a tension he hadn't realized he was holding leaving his body. "Good," he murmured. But relief was short-lived. Lillian's expression changed as she examined the baby's neck. "There's something you should see." She held up the small silver pendant, the feather charm he'd noticed earlier. Under the layer of grime, faint initials were engraved, A.R. Lillian looked up. "Any idea what that means?" He shook his head. "Not yet, but I'll find out." She studied him for a long moment before saying softly, "You still can't walk away from a rescue, can you?" Ethan almost smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Some habits die hard. For the next hour, silence filled the clinic, punctuated only by the soft hum of the heater and the dog's breathing. The storm outside began to fade, but in Ethan's mind, another kind of storm was gathering. He could feel it, the tension in the air, the wrongness of it all. A baby in the woods, a dog stabbed, a fire, too much to be coincidence. When Lillian finally stepped away from the table, she said quietly, "He'll live, but he needs rest. You should too." Ethan nodded but didn't move. He stood by the window, staring out at the swirling snow. In the reflection, the silver feather caught the light. Small, fragile, defiant. Somewhere beyond the storm, someone knew that child was still alive, and if they had tried to erase her once, they would try again. Ethan clenched his fists. Whatever this was, he wasn't done with it yet. Outside, faint against the quiet hum of dawn, the distant sound of an engine idled, too long, too still, before fading into the woods. Morning crept into Bozeman under a dim gray sky. The snow softened into slush, and the storm's roar replaced by dripping eaves and whispering wind. Ethan Cole hadn't slept. He stood by the window of the veterinary clinic, eyes fixed on the faint light filtering through the frost. The baby, still nameless, swaddled now in clean blankets, slept quietly in a small crib near the heater. The German shepherd rested beside her, wrapped in bandages, chest rising slow but strong. Lillian Moore moved quietly around them, making notes in a worn logbook. When Ethan turned, she spoke without looking up. "You've been awake all night." He nodded. "Can't shake the feeling someone's still out there." Lillian didn't argue. She had seen that look before. Soldiers who returned home but never really left the battlefield. "The police?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "Not yet. No evidence of who did this. And if this was intentional, I don't want them warned." He checked the baby again, brushing his hand over the small silver feather. The initials A.R. glinted faintly under the lamp. Somewhere in the storm's wake, a family was missing, or worse. He needed to know which. Lillian handed him a folded map. "If you followed the trail from the woods, there's only one property near that ridge, burned down 2 nights ago. The fire crew said it was abandoned." Ethan looked up sharply. "Abandoned?" "That's what the report said," she replied. "But I know the man who filed it, Captain Jenkins. He's not the type to overlook survivors." The word burned lit something behind Ethan's eyes. The scent of smoke on the dog, the ash on the baby's blanket, it all circled back. He picked up his coat. "Keep him here. Lock the doors." Lillian hesitated, then said quietly, "Be careful. You're not in uniform anymore." He gave a faint half-smile. "Some habits don't care." By mid-morning, Ethan reached the edge of the forest where the storm had carved shallow drifts between trees. The trail wound downward until the charred skeleton of a house came into view. Blackened beams jutted from the snow like broken ribs. The smell of burned wood lingered in the air, a scent he knew too well from villages scorched by war. He moved slowly, scanning the ruins. Under his boot, a shard of glass cracked, revealing a photograph half buried in soot. He brushed it clean. A woman's face, young, kind-eyed, held a baby in her arms. The same silver feather glinted around the infant's neck. Ethan's chest tightened. "So that's you?" he murmured, looking toward the baby's direction back in the clinic. As he explored deeper, the crunch of snow behind him made him freeze. He turned sharply, hand instinctively brushing the holster at his hip. A man stepped out from the tree line. Thick coat, badge clipped to his belt. "Easy," the man said, raising his hands. "Sheriff's Department." Ethan lowered his guard, but stayed wary. "Didn't expect anyone else out here?" The man nodded. "Deputy Sam Keller. Got a call from fire control about someone sniffing around." He glanced at the ruins. "You?" Ethan nodded. "Name's Cole. I found a child near here last night. A woman's photo led me back." Keller frowned. "A child? No one reported a missing baby." Ethan handed him the burned photo. "You might want to change that." The deputy studied it, his brow furrowing. "That's Anna Rivers. Used to live here with her husband. Folks said they kept to themselves. Fire crew thought she didn't make it out." "Her body found?" Ethan asked. Keller hesitated. "No, just blood near the back door. Looked like someone got dragged out before the blaze." Ethan stared toward the dark woods beyond the wreckage. "Then she's alive, or was when this started." Keller shifted uneasily. "You shouldn't be here alone, Cole. This scene's still under investigation." Ethan ignored the warning, kneeling near the remains of the back wall. Beneath a melted beam, a length of rope lay frayed and torn, one end darkened with blood. The prints around it were strange, human footprints mixed with paw marks. He touched the ash. "The dog fought back," he murmured, "bought her time to run." Keller crouched beside him, shaking his head. "If she ran, she didn't get far. We searched 2 miles out before the storm buried everything." Ethan stood, brushing soot from his hands. "Then we search again." The deputy gave a faint, uncertain chuckle. "You talk like you're still on duty." "Habit," Ethan said simply. They worked silently through the remains, turning debris, mapping prints, marking trails. At the far end of the property, Ethan found a child's rattle, half melted, its paint blistered by heat. He pocketed it gently. Nearby, tire tracks cut through the snow, 2 sets, one heavy, one lighter. Keller bent to inspect them. "These weren't from the fire crew? Too recent." Ethan's jaw tightened. They came back. He followed the tracks until they disappeared into the tree line where the ground dipped toward a frozen stream. There, something caught his eye. Fabric snagged on a branch. He pulled it free, part of a torn sleeve, faint scent of smoke and perfume still clinging to it. "She was here," he said quietly. The wind shifted, carrying faint echoes from deeper in the forest. For a moment, Ethan thought he heard movement, A voice, maybe. Keller turned, frowning. "What is it?" Ethan held up a hand for silence. There, a distant metallic clatter, like a car door slamming. Then nothing. Keller moved toward the sound, but Ethan stopped him. "No backup, no comms. We're blind out here." He scanned the horizon, instincts sharpening. Someone was close, watching. The same feeling from last night, eyes behind the dark, waiting. He turned back to the burned house, now just a hollow shell framed by smoke-stained snow. Somewhere out there, Anna Rivers was either running from someone or already caught. Either way, she wasn't gone. Keller checked his watch. "We should head back, file the report." Ethan looked toward the tree line once more, the faint outline of tire tracks already filling with snow. "You do that," he said. "I'll be right behind you." But when Keller turned toward his car, Ethan didn't move. He knelt once more by the half-buried photograph, tracing the burned edge with his thumb. The baby's smile in the picture felt hauntingly familiar now. He tucked it into his jacket and whispered, "Hang on, Anna. I'll find you." Behind him, deep in the woods, something flickered. A glint of metal, a shadow shifting between the trees. The faint hum of an idling engine carried through the cold, then fell silent. And in that silence, Ethan knew the hunt had already begun. Evening settled over Bozeman with a cold, amber light that sank slowly behind the ridge, painting the pines in long, uneasy shadows. Ethan Cole stood beside his truck at the forest's edge, the photograph of Anna Rivers still in his jacket pocket. Snow had crusted into ice along the road, and his breath fogged as he replayed the sound he'd heard earlier, the faint echo of an engine deep in the woods. He knew what it meant. Whoever had taken her was still nearby. Back at the clinic, the baby and the German shepherd were safe under Lillian's care, but Ethan couldn't stop thinking of the woman in the burned photograph. Alive, terrified, maybe fighting to stay that way. He glanced toward the tree line. "All right," he muttered. "Let's finish what we started." The forest was quieter now, the air brittle and sharp. His flashlight cut narrow tunnels through the dark as he moved. Tracks in the snow guided him. Boot prints half frozen, spaced unevenly as if someone had been dragging weight. He followed them until the trees began to thin, and the smell of gasoline drifted faintly on the air. That was when he saw it. A small cabin tucked behind the slope, its windows blacked out, smoke curling from a narrow chimney. The place looked abandoned, but something about the stillness was wrong. Too careful, too deliberate. Ethan crouched behind a fallen log, his instincts whispering the old rhythm of reconnaissance. Observe, plan, act. Through the cracked slats of a shutter, he caught a glimpse, a figure moving inside, pacing. Another shadow appeared, broader, rougher, the flick of a lighter briefly illuminating a scarred face. Two men, one angry, the other anxious. And then, faintly, a voice, a woman's, hoarse and shaking. "Please, you don't have to do this." Ethan's pulse tightened. Anna Rivers was alive. Inside, Anna Rivers clung to a chair leg, wrists bound, eyes swollen from smoke and fear. She had been running for 2 nights before they found her again. The men who captured her weren't strangers. One of them, Mason Holt, had once worked with her husband, hauling freight for a construction supplier. She recognized his voice before she saw his face. Mason had debts, ugly ones, and when the North Ridge crew came to collect, he took their money and their silence. He didn't enjoy hurting her, but he didn't have the courage to stop it either. "They just want the kid," he muttered earlier. "Once they have her, this ends." But Anna had seen what they did to her husband before the fire. She knew that kind of promise meant nothing. Ethan moved closer, steps light over the snow. He could hear bits of conversation now through the thin walls. The second man, Reed Vance, the one with the scar, spoke with a lazy menace. "The boss said she talks. We make it quiet. If the soldier's sniffing around, we'll handle him too." His words sliced through Ethan's focus. Soldier, they already knew he was involved. He circled the cabin, searching for a weakness. A window cracked, a latch half rusted. Near the back, a small hatch led to a wood cellar. It was old, but enough for a man to slip through. He eased the lock free with his knife and descended into the cold. The air stank of damp earth and kerosene. As he moved forward, the faintest sound made him pause. Claws scraping wood. Then a low growl. A pair of eyes glinted in the dark, familiar, sharp with recognition. The German shepherd. It limped toward him from the shadows, tail low but determined. Ethan froze, heart twisting. "You followed me?" he whispered. The dog's ribs still showed through the bandage lines, but there was fire in its gaze. It had slipped free from the clinic somehow, tracked him through the snow, the instinct of a protector too loyal to rest. Ethan knelt, running a hand along its neck. "All right, Aiden, one more fight." Together, they crept up through the cellar. The sound of shouting above grew louder, Anna crying out, a chair crashing. Ethan pushed open the hatch just enough to see Reed raise a pistol. Mason stood frozen, uncertain. Ethan didn't wait. He shoved the door open, moving fast, his shoulder slamming into Reed's back. The gun went off, the shot burying itself in the ceiling. The room erupted in chaos. Anna screamed. Mason lunged for the door, but Aiden intercepted, snarling, teeth flashing as he forced the man back. Ethan wrestled Reed to the ground, the two men rolling across the floor. The pistol clattered away, spinning under the table. Reed swung hard, catching Ethan's jaw, but Ethan drove his elbow into the man's throat. They broke apart, just as Mason reached for a shotgun propped against the wall. Aiden leapt, slamming into his arm before he could fire. The weapon discharged into the ceiling, showering dust and splinters. Ethan seized Reed by the collar and drove him into the wall. "Where's the rest of your crew?" he demanded. Reed spat blood and laughed. "Too late, soldier. They're already coming." A sound outside cut through the silence. The low rumble of engines approaching, headlights cutting through the trees. Anna stared in terror. "They'll kill us all," she whispered. Ethan glanced out the window. 3 trucks, dark and unmarked, sliding over the snow. Men climbed out, their movements disciplined, not thugs, soldiers of a different kind. The North Ridge crew wasn't just a gang, it was organized, trained, and they were closing in fast. Ethan turned to Anna, cutting her bindings with his knife. "Can you walk?" She nodded weakly. "Then move." He looked to Aiden. The dog limped but stayed ready, ears forward, eyes locked on the door. Ethan grabbed the pistol from the floor, checked the chamber. 1 round left. Not much, but it would do. They slipped through the back door into the trees as the trucks stopped outside. Voices shouted. Floodlights pierced the dark. A man barked orders. "Spread out! Find them!" Ethan guided Anna along the ridge, keeping low. Aiden followed close, breathing ragged but steady. From the woods behind them came the sound of gunfire. The cabin erupted in flame. Someone had tossed a torch inside, turning the building into a pyre. Anna turned, tears streaking her face. "They'll burn everything." Ethan's voice was low but certain. "Not us." They reached a clearing where moonlight spilled across the snow. Far off, sirens wailed. Keller's backup, maybe, or someone else entirely. Ethan didn't look back. He focused on the trail ahead, but in his mind, one thought burned clear. They weren't after revenge. They were after the child. He stopped, scanning the horizon. "Aiden," he whispered. The dog raised its head, alert. "They know where she is." Behind them, the flames reached the treetops, turning the snow crimson. And in that red light, Ethan's eyes hardened with realization. The real battle hadn't even begun. Night had swallowed the mountains whole. The sky above Gallatin Pass was black and heavy, the forest below glowing faintly from the fire that devoured the cabin they'd escaped. Ethan Cole led Anna Rivers and the wounded shepherd through the snow, each step sinking deeper as adrenaline began to fade. Behind them, the echo of gunfire had died out, replaced by the relentless hum of engines somewhere in the distance. They had bought time, but not enough. Anna stumbled once, catching herself against a tree. "They'll find us," she whispered, voice raw. Ethan looked back at her, eyes steady. "Not if we move faster." The trail curved downward into a ravine where the air grew colder, the wind sharper. Aiden, the German shepherd, moved ahead despite his limp, sniffing the ground with silent purpose. Ethan watched him closely. The dog instincts had saved them more than once. That same instinct, the one that made him shield the baby against the snow, was now leading them toward something unseen. Ethan trusted that. He had learned long ago that survival often depended not on strategy, but on faith. Faith in your team, even when that team had fur and scars instead of a rank. They reached an old service road half buried under snow. Tire tracks crossed it, fresh ones. Ethan knelt, brushing frost aside. "Two vehicles," he murmured. They split up. Anna's breath caught. "One of them's going for the clinic, isn't it?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have to. The same realization burned in both of them. The Northridge crew was after the child. He rose, jaw set. "We'll cut across the pass, reach town before they do?" Anna looked at him, exhaustion mixing with disbelief. "You can't outrun trucks in this." Ethan's reply came calm and low. "I don't plan to run." They moved along the ridge, the moon breaking through clouds in brief flashes, lighting their path. Below, the valley stretched wide and silent, dotted with the faint orange glows of distant ranches. Ethan's mind ran through options. Warn Lillian, call Keller, find a defensible position. Every plan had risk, but hesitation would cost lives. A noise behind them shattered the quiet, a branch snapping, then the crunch of boots. Ethan pulled Anna down behind a fallen pine, signaling her to stay silent. Shadows moved along the slope. 3 men, flashlights sweeping the snow. The one in front carried a rifle slung low, the confident stride of a man who'd hunted before. Ethan recognized him instantly. Derek Vaughn, the Northridge lieutenant, known from Keller's files and the audio recordings. Vaughn's reputation had traveled through whispers in Montana's underbelly. Former contractor, dishonorably discharged, now running guns and debts for the crew. A man who thrived on unfinished business. Vaughn's voice carried through the trees. "Check the ridge. The woman's with him. Don't shoot the dog. Boss wants proof it's still breathing." Ethan's grip tightened around his pistol. He leaned toward Anna. "Stay low. When I move, you run for that clearing." Her eyes widened. "You can't fight all of them." "I don't have to," he said. "I just need to distract them." Aiden growled softly beside him, muscles coiling. Ethan placed a hand on the dog's neck. "Not yet," he whispered. But the shepherd's gaze was locked on the approaching figures, unflinching, fearless. When the first beam of light passed over their hiding place, Ethan moved. He rose from the snow like a shadow breaking free, fired twice. The shots cracked through the night. One flashlight dropped, another swung wildly. "Cole!" Vaughn's voice roared, half shock, half fury. Ethan dove sideways as bullets ripped bark from a nearby tree. "Go!" he shouted to Anna. She ran, clutching her torn coat, stumbling through the drifts. Aiden launched forward, intercepting one of the gunmen who tried to follow. The man screamed as the shepherd struck, a flash of chaos in the dark. Ethan caught movement, Vaughn raising his rifle, and fired again. The bullet grazed Vaughn's shoulder, spinning him back. But more lights appeared from below the ridge. Reinforcements? Too many? Ethan called out to Aiden, "Fall back!" The dog obeyed, blood staining the snow where he'd fought. Together, they sprinted after Anna, who had reached a narrow bridge spanning a frozen stream. The wood groaned under their weight as they crossed. Behind them, Vaughn's voice echoed, "You can run, soldier, but you can't hide her forever." They reached a small ranger outpost at the edge of the valley, a forgotten shack used in summer months by trail wardens. Ethan kicked the door open, ushered Anna and Aiden inside. The place smelled of dust and oil, the radio on the counter long dead. He barricaded the door with a table, then dug through a supply chest, flares, first aid kits, and an old map. Anna sat on the floor, trembling. "You knew this would happen." Ethan didn't answer. He spread the map on the table. "They'll hit the clinic next. Keller's station is 15 miles out. If we can reach him—" The crack of a rifle shattered the window, glass exploding across the floor. A round buried itself in the wall inches from Anna's head. "Down!" Ethan shouted. He returned fire through the window, forcing the shooters back. The silence that followed was brief, broken only by the dog's ragged panting. When it was over, Anna whispered, "Why are they after her? Why my daughter?" Ethan hesitated. He had wondered the same since the first moment he saw the feather pendant. Now he remembered something from the recovered data. Names, transactions, a coded list tied to military research. "Your husband?" he said quietly. "He worked for a supply contractor, didn't he? North Ridge used that company as cover to move illegal arms. He must have found out." Anna stared, realization dawning. "He tried to expose them." Ethan nodded. "And they silenced him. You and the baby were never supposed to survive." Outside, engines rumbled again. Vaughn's men were regrouping. Ethan looked to Aiden. The dog stood, trembling, one paw dragging slightly, but eyes alive with fire. "You ready?" The shepherd let out a low bark, the sound of defiance. Ethan handed Anna the radio mic. "If you hear me shout twice, call for help. Use Keller's frequency." She grabbed his sleeve. "You'll die out there." He met her eyes, calm and resolute. "Not tonight." He stepped out into the snow, rifle raised, Aiden at his side. The forest swallowed them both, shadows against the pale light. From the distance came a single gunshot, then silence, then another. The valley held its breath. Inside the shack, Anna clutched the radio, listening to static. Then faintly, through the crackle, Ethan's voice came, strained, Urgent. Anna, they've split up. Two heading your way. Keep the lights off and—" The transmission cut. Anna stared at the radio, her pulse pounding, then turned toward the door where snow seeped through the cracks. From somewhere deep in the woods came a new sound, a child's cry. But her daughter was miles away. Dawn broke pale and ghostly over the valley, painting the snowfields in shades of silver and ash. Smoke still drifted from the ruins in the distance, curling upward like a slow prayer for the dead. Inside the ranger outpost, Anna Rivers sat huddled by the radio, the blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Static hissed in her ear, but there was no reply, no word from Ethan, no signal, no voice. Only the wind outside and the echo of that strange, impossible sound she'd heard in the woods. A child's cry where no child should be. Then came a noise, boots crunching over snow. Anna's heart lurched. She turned off the lamp, gripping the pistol Ethan had left her. The door creaked open. A silhouette stepped into the light. For a split second, her fear flared, then relief broke through. It was Ethan Cole, pale, bloodied, but standing. Behind him limped Aiden, the German shepherd, muzzle dusted with frost, eyes sharp though weary. Ethan shut the door and leaned against it, catching his breath. "They're gone," he said hoarsely. "Vaughn's dead. The rest scattered when Keller's men showed up." Anna lowered the gun, her hands trembling. You're sure?" Ethan nodded. "For now." He crossed the room, setting his rifle aside. "Keller's team will reach the clinic by sunrise. Lillian's safe. So's the baby." His voice softened at that last word, and for the first time, something like peace flickered behind his tired eyes. Outside, the first rays of light spilled through the trees. But Anna still looked uneasy. "Ethan, I heard something out there, a child." Her words hung heavy in the cold air. Ethan froze. "You mean you heard her?" "No," Anna whispered. "It wasn't my daughter. It came from deeper in the woods." Before he could reply, the door burst open again, and Deputy Sam Keller stumbled inside, face raw from cold. He carried a radio and a grim look. "Cole," he said breathlessly, "you need to see this. One of my men found a truck half buried down the ridge, registered to North Ridge. There's a body in the back." Ethan's expression hardened. "Vaughn?" Keller shook his head. "No. Another man. Someone higher up, maybe. And the strange part, there was a second infant seat inside, empty." The silence that followed was suffocating. Anna's hands flew to her mouth. "There were two?" she whispered. "Twins?" Keller nodded slowly. "It looks that way, but we don't know where the other child is." Ethan rubbed his forehead, trying to piece together what that meant. The fire, the chase, the coated ledgers from the burned house, all of it pointed to something bigger. "North Ridge wasn't just hiding arms," he said finally. "They were moving people, families, selling them to pay off debts." Keller grimaced. "Trafficking?" The word tasted like ash. Aiden stirred near the window, ears pricking toward the forest. Ethan followed his gaze. The dog growled, low, one paw against the door. "Something's out there," he said quietly. Keller raised his weapon. "You sure it's not wind?" "No," Ethan replied. "He only does that when he's certain." They stepped outside. The forest seemed endless under the pale dawn, every branch heavy with frost. Then, faintly, came the cry again, soft, fleeting, unmistakably human. Ethan's heart clenched. He motioned for Keller to circle left while he moved straight ahead, Aiden close at his side. They followed the sound through the trees until they reached a clearing where the snow had been disturbed. There, Half buried beneath a fallen branch lay a small crate wrapped in a tarp. Ethan dropped to his knees, tearing it open, and froze. Inside, wrapped in a gray blanket like the first, was another child, alive. Anna appeared behind him, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, my God," she whispered. Ethan lifted the baby carefully. Its skin was cold but pink beneath the rising sun. "It's her twin," Anna murmured. "She's been out here all night." Keller radioed for the medics, his voice shaking slightly. "We found another survivor, infant, alive." He looked at Ethan. "You just gave this case a heartbeat." They returned to the outpost as sirens began echoing faintly through the valley. Anna sat with both infants in her arms now, the one from the storm and the one from the woods, while Aiden rested beside her, head on his paws, finally still. Ethan stood near the doorway, staring out at the forest that had swallowed and returned so many lives. "You think this ends it?" Keller asked quietly. Ethan shook his head. "This ends a chapter, but Northridge has more men, more secrets." The sound of approaching engines grew louder. Police vehicles cutting through snow. Ethan turned to Anna. "When this is over, you need to disappear for a while, change your name, start again." She met his gaze, voice trembling. "And you?" He glanced at the dog, then back at her. "Me? I've got something to finish." As the sun climbed higher, the forest shimmered with light, melting the last of the night's frost. A medevac chopper descended nearby, its blades scattering snow like feathers. The rescue team rushed in, lifting Anna and the babies aboard. She reached out, gripping Ethan's hand tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved us." He managed a faint smile. "No," he said. "You reminded me what saving means." The helicopter rose, vanishing into the sky. Keller approached, hands in his pockets. "You coming back to town?" Ethan looked down at the blood on his sleeve, then at the German shepherd beside him. Aiden's eyes met his, tired, loyal, and knowing. "Not yet," Ethan said. "There's still one name missing from the list." Keller nodded, understanding. "You'll find him." When Keller left with the convoy, silence reclaimed the valley. Ethan walked toward the ridge, the cold wind tugging at his coat. Aiden followed close behind. The tracks of the North Ridge trucks stretched into the distance like scars on the snow. Somewhere beyond those mountains, the man who started it all was still out there. Ethan glanced once toward the sunrise, then down at Aiden. "Let's finish this, partner." The shepherd gave a low bark, tail flicking once. Together they disappeared into the pines, two silhouettes against the light. One man, one dog, walking toward whatever fire waited beyond the next horizon. Sometimes God's miracles don't arrive with thunder or wings of light. They come quietly, through a soldier's courage, a mother's faith, and the loyalty of a wounded dog that refused to give up. In a world darkened by fear and cruelty, there are still sparks of grace, moments when heaven touches the earth in the gentlest ways. Maybe that miracle is someone who shows up when you least expect it, or a second chance you didn't believe you deserved. So tonight, if this story touched your heart, take a moment to thank God for the silent guardians in your life, the people and creatures who love without asking anything in return. May their strength remind you that faith still moves mountains, even the ones inside us. If you believe that God still works through love, courage, and loyal hearts, share this story, leave a comment with your prayer, and subscribe for more true stories of hope and redemption. May the Lord bless you and protect you wherever you're watching from. Amen.